Hello everyone, this is podfic back with another podfic. Today I'll be home with Frayed Feathers by Fiction for Life _NZ on Ao3. This is an epic the musical fic. I'm starting that because I couldn't resist. Okay, here's the summary. There were rumors, quickly squashed and dismissed by the island kingdom, that the Prince of Ithaca had grown wings on his feet when he was a boy. There were rumors that he had wings elsewhere too, on his back and behind his ears. They were squashed even quicker. Anyone who could get a look at the prince could see that this boy was not adorned with feathers of any kind. None of them knew, and Ithaca's royal family planned to keep it that way, fearing that this problem of unknown origin, curse, or yet another divine being's fling with a mortal, would be seen as an insult to the gods and bring down their wrath. Odysseus has grown used to having to cut down or hide the extra appendages, but this struggle only grew when he was forced in the Trojan War. Now, with the war at its end and his fleet ready to return home, he only had one thing in mind: getting home to his wife and son. Or an alternative universe where Hermes' relationship to one particular Greek hero becomes a bit more prominent without anyone knowing or understanding it, because for once nobody kept track of the bloodlines, and Hermes suddenly has a much better reason to help Odysseus on his journey. Alright, this is Chapter 1, Just a Man. There were rumors when Odysseus was growing up that he had grown wings on his feet when he was still a young boy. There were rumors as he got older that he had more sets of wings, a pair on his back and a pair tucked behind his ears. These rumors were, unfortunately, true, but nobody knew that except Ithaca's royal family, and that was how it would stay. Whatever this thing was that has caused the size of his heels to blister and bleed until tiny wings had grown in could not be made known to the rest of the world, because it wasn't a blessing. At no point had anyone prayed for him to be gifted with such an odd feature. Athena herself admitted to not knowing the reason for them, but that they had reminded her of some of the features found on gods or other divine beings, and that was a truly terrifying thought. His parents were, as far as he knew, faithful to one another. They had not slept with a god or creature of monstrous origin, as the wings had appeared years after his birth, which led to the conclusion that they were either a curse of unknown origin, or some god had been incredibly sneaky and spending a night with his mother without even her knowledge. Both conclusions put him at a much higher risk of death than he would have liked. If it was a curse, he could be punished for daring to appear as anything but a mortal man, let alone as being closer to the appearance of certain gods. If it was the doing of a god, then he would likely find himself and his mother murdered by Hera once she inevitably discovered that there was another man who did not look like a man. It was his father, driven by immense fear and his growing madness, that the easiest solution to the problem would be to cut them off. And because of all his wits, Odysseus had still been young and afraid at the time. He agreed. It hurt terribly. The sets on his heels came off surprisingly clean, and while he couldn't walk for a day, the wounds closed with some well-wrapped clothes and time. The larger set of wings, settled on his lower back just above his hips, required more effort and stitches once they were finally removed. And as for the other ones behind his ears, his father had said sometimes he could still hear the scream he'd let out when the blade was taken to the first. He'd vomited and bled so profusely that they stopped and resorted to binding it up so that it would heal and remain intact. His thrashing had caused the blade to nick the back of his ear, leaving a shallow scar. They were far more sensitive than the rest. He'd reacted so badly they feared trying to cut them off would kill him, so he'd hid them instead, under oversized headbands and Peleus. The wounds from where the other sets had been closed up and become light scars. Easy to cover up or brush off as a simple injury he'd received from being the reckless young boy he was. They had been hopeful that they avoided the wrath of any gods that might soon turn their eyes towards them and be less than understanding like Athena had. And then they grew back. He'd woken up half a year after they cut away the wings in pain, and by the end of the day he was found passed out in his bed with blood on the blankets and new sets of wings in place of the old ones. A month after he recovered from the process of regrowing them, his father cut them off again, and again, and again, until he was old enough to do it himself. The ends outweighed the pain of the means. If he could go half a year without having to hide extra appendages anywhere but on his head, he would, and he did. He did get a few odd comments about the cloth around his feet and the Peleus he always wore, or the gradually darkening scars on his sides, but he was already known for being cunning. What harm did being called a little bit odd due to the mix? Only one other person had been allowed to see them, his incredible wife, Penelope. He'd been scared at first, and he kicked himself for ever thinking that such a brilliant woman with a wit to match his own would ever sell him out. She loved him for all his unwelcome flaws, and made him a special Peleus to wear so that he would be questioned on the clothing article even less. It was a gift from his beloved wife. Why would he not wear it? She made him feel safe enough to show them when they were alone, to lie still and let her guard her weaver's hands through the feathers until they were clean and sorted, to let her guide his hands as he sliced them off and wrapped his fresh wounds. She didn't agree with it, but she understood why it was done, and for that he loved her even more. But she wasn't here anymore to help him. She was back in Ithaca, waiting for his return with their growing son Telemachus, and he was stuck in the war camps outside of Troy for 10 years, begging for aid from Athena and keeping the damn things hidden from his fellow kings and soldiers. A crisis just barely avoided. A line towed so carefully he didn't think he'd ever be able to step off of it. The actions of wrapping his feet and sides and stuffing his helmet over his Peleus, a reflex day in and day out. And now a child had seen them as well. It was deliberate, an attempt to give him the strength to take the infant's life. He killed men for less, after all. These wings were not to be seen by anyone but himself and his wife. Hector's son, a last thing between Odysseus and his home, an infant whose life had been foretold by the gods, who could only be stopped now by his own hand, the blood of a child to save that of his family's. They were pretty, a perfect distraction for the baby as he pondered its approaching death, a blend of warm browns with a shock of blood red at the tips, and an inside so white he could swear it glowed in the rare opportunity that they saw the sun. The ones that would grow on his back matched, and the ones on his heels were perfectly white save for some brown flecks. As bizarre as they were, they certainly weren't garish. "You're as old as he was when I left for war," he rasped, letting the feathery appendages brush across their chubby fingers as they grabbed for it. The sounds of battle from outside were growing quiet, the last of the Trojans dying by his comrades' hands. This child was all that was left to deal with. Then he could go home. Finally. He forced himself off the ground and over to the crib, laying the fragile bundle back where he had found it, and raised his blade. His other hand came up to cover their eyes as he readied the blade over their heart. One quick plunge. Hopefully it wouldn't hurt too much. They cooed as his callous fingers brushed across their forehead, those same chubby fingers straining to grab on and hold. He jerked his hand back, gut churning with all those sickening emotions that were threatening to spill over. He could feel the feathers behind his ears fluffing up, bristling with anticipation. The blade came back down to his side, the other hand swiping at the sweat beading on his face. "How am I supposed to do this?" he croaked. "How can I possibly hurt you? I'm just a man, one who wants to get home." Here he was again, spilling all of his secrets to another, a child slated for death. "It's been so long. I just want to go back with my family. I trade everything to see them again," he admitted softly, plucking his Peleus off of the ground and tucking it back over the wings on his head. "But I can't do that when you could grow up to kill them. I can't let that happen. As much as what I'm about to do will hurt." Helmet slid back into place over his head, and as he plucked them back up, rougher this time, like a bag of coins rather than a child, he mumbled to himself, "How far does a man have to go before he becomes a monster?" From the wall he could see the aftermath of the attack. The sickening smell of blood and burning reached up to meet him as he held the infant out and away from him. His fellow soldiers stood below, some watching him as he ended the war for good, by removing the one thing that could start it again. "Forgive me," he begged, to whom he did not know. He'd wondered a few times when he was younger if these wings could ever be used to fly, but they were too small to hold his weight. Even if he allowed them to stay and grow in properly, if he jumped from this wall now, he would die. When he dropped this infant from the wall, they would die. They swayed from their makeshift hammock as he held them out over the empty air, the fabric slipping further between his fingers. With every painful thudding heartbeat in his chest, the infant looked scared now, fidgeting with their sling. "Forgive me," he sighed, feeling tears start to stream, "but I'm just a man." He let go. And that is the end of Chapter 1. I was originally planning to do a Percy Jackson podfic this week and not start an epic one for a while, but then I found this, and it quickly became one of my favorite fan fictions I've ever read. I had to do it. I had to do it. So next week I'll do the Percy Jackson one I was gonna do, and then after that we'll be back to Our Broken Repair Boy. So this was part 1. I hope you all enjoyed. Everybody have a good night.